-17. Deep in Alaska's Brooks Range frozen ridgeline, -30. 4 soldiers cut off from the world at a place called Kestrel. Just a training mission, nothing more. Then the radio died, the dogs went silent, and we found prints in the snow, huge, front heavy, like something half wolf, half nightmare had walked through camp. We thought it was the cold messing with us, until it started hunting back. So before we continue, please make sure to like and subscribe to support the channel, and comment down below where you're watching from. Thanks. Late February, Alaska. The Brooks Range foothills, about 40 miles north of Bettles. We sat on a ridgeline above a frozen river braid. Nothing fancy. Training outpost. Call sign Kestrel. Not a real base. A scatter of tents, a generator that coughed like a smoker, a fuel bladder that grew its own ice, and a wind that never shut up. Minus numbers all week. Wind chill pushing past -30 when it felt like being mean. Ice fog rolled through like a bad dream you could taste. The barometer kept sliding down. We watched it sink and said nothing, the way you do when you know tomorrow's going to kick you in the teeth and you still have to walk into it. We were 4. Sergeant Mark Delgado led. 11, Bravo, quiet, steady, Arctic vet. Kept a laminated wind chill card and tapped it. Flesh gets dumb here. Dry humor. Never yelled. Corporal Ethan Hayes was second. Also infantry. Winter survival guy. Practical, loyal. Not wizard. Fixed zippers with floss. Counted fuel with a pencil until the tent smelled like school. Specialist Novak Rook ran the radio and knew enough medic to keep you breathing. Cautious optimist. Checklist habit. Hands, feet, head. Batteries stashed in warm spots. Listen through static like a dog. Me, Private Lucas Miller. Youngest. Green but stubborn. I hauled the heavy crap. Mule work. Learned fast to shut up and move when the wind got weird. We had sled dogs, 6 of them, on loan from a search and rescue musher who had signed some contract none of us read. Good dogs. Musher was not with us. Dogs stayed on chains near a wind shadow behind the mess tent. They hauled small loads across the river ice when we needed. Meat and kibble went down fast. They watched us like we were slow. Smart eyes. One with a black ear that never bothered to bark. One too eager, always in a prance like a kid. They ate, slept, and stared at the ridge like they knew the weather better than our chart. Gear. Keep it simple. Cold loop rifles. Pistols as insurance. A beat-up shotgun for wildlife with not many shells. Trip flares, pen flares. 2 handheld flares for oh hell moments. Old snow machine that needed a pat on the gas tank to move. A pulk sled for gear. Generator for power, with fuel we counted like penny candy. The sky felt nice and...
Waheela is a Native Alaskan Native American legend. The spirit that takes form of a giant wolf or a giant killer whale, sometimes in between there. It's guardian of both the land and the water of Alaska. As long as you respect the land and the water, it will not harm you. It's there to keep people in areas that should not be in there. Basically, it's like the bouncers in clubs. It might have been a creature at one time, but it turned into a legend over the years because it's more closely related to wolves and killer whales because they pack animals. They're very tied to nature and everything. And a lot of people have come face to face with Waheela, Waheela, and everything. I haven't came across, but I have heard stories about it from my uncle Mike, my cousin Bobby, my uncle Ed, my uncle Bubba. All of them used to tell stories about Native American cultures and legends and everything. But if you have an encounter with this type of creature, it leaves you with respect for nature. Because legend goes, when he lays eyes on you, he judges your soul, not your body, your soul. If he deems you a threat to Alaskan culture, Alaskan land, he will take you out. There would be no signs of your body, no signs of you ever. He just wipes you off. Just like wipes you gone. And I mean, why can't it be a she? Because this creature, this legend, choose to be a man. Enjoy.
that iced up like a candy cane and drove Rook nuts. The routine was the same day after day. That was by design. Routine keeps you from getting stupid. Morning checks. Weather first. We read the little black line falling like it owed someone money. Hayes would fold the chart, tuck it in, and say, "Buckle up." We checked fuel. We checked the generator line. We walked the perimeter with a stick and a headlamp in gray light that felt like a dream you can't wake from. We checked the tripwires and the stakes that the wind loved to rock loose. We checked the dogs. We scraped their bowls with gloved fingers and pretended we had more meat than we did. We came back in and steamed like horses. We dried socks over a line that sagged from the heat and our optimism. We ate. The mess tent smelled like diesel, coffee, and men. The generator thrummed through everything. The wind scrubbed snow off the ridge. You could feel it on the tent poles. The aurora was a smear some nights, more gray than green. It hung like a stain behind the clouds. We planned routes on the map with fingers because pencils snapped and pens froze. The river braid was our highway if the overflow ice did not get cute. The ridge gave us sight when it wanted to. We pushed small resupply runs to a marker downriver where our guard unit could scoop them later. We were training, yes, but it never feels like training when the cold is trying to take bites out of you. We did radio checks. Rook tuned in, out, up, down. Static. A few words from the relay when the clouds loosened their fists. A pop that might have been a voice and might have been the sky burping. He wrote down times. "We've got a window at 0940-ish," he'd say, then grin when he knew he sounded silly with the ish, then stop grinning when the ish froze into nothing. Delgado did his walks like a metronome. He would stop and point with a mitten to a naked patch of metal. "Touch that with bare skin and you will become attached for life," he'd say. He'd flash that chart again. -20 plus wind equals stupid fingers. We laughed. We nodded. We kept gloves on. We all had a story about metal and skin and the sound it makes when you part them. "You do not forget that sound." Hayes gave advice like a slow drip. "Rotate the batteries under your arm," he'd say, holding his armpit tight. "Don't put wet socks on the stove. They stink up everyone's life. Breathe warm air on your lenses, not spit. You're not a caveman." He taught me to blow across the lens, gentle, cheek warm, so the glass cleared for a second and I could see enough to shoot. It worked. It felt dumb. It was perfect. Rook had a habit. He'd pat his pockets like he was counting rosary beads. Radio, batteries, bandage, knife, pen, notepad, chocolate. Hands. Feet. Head, he'd say. We'd say it back. It felt goofy the first week. It felt like prayer by the second. I asked too much about frostbite. It scared me. I'd seen pictures. Black toes. Yellow blisters. I asked if the cold could crack bone. Delgado said bone was harder to hurt than pride. Hayes said black toes start white and dumb. Rook said hands, feet, head, and smiled. He was the optimist even when he was wound tight. I wanted to be like that. I pretended I was. The dogs breathed steam into the gray. Their chains rang. Their paws cut little crescents into the hard crust. Sometimes they barked at nothing. Sometimes they stared at the willow scrub and did not make a sound. I learned quick that barking was fine. Quiet was the thing that pressed at your ribs. Normal days ended with coffee that tasted like a dirty spoon. We dried gear by the heater and pretended the diesel tang was some weird soup we all were in together. I slept with my boots close and my heart closer to the idea that this was all going to be a story I told later. I did not know yet what kind of story it would be. I was still young enough to think I got to choose. It started small. It always does. Little things that did not fit, but you can explain anything if you try hard enough, and it is easier to shrug when you are tired and cold. On a perimeter check, I found a snowshoe hare half buried near a drift. At first I thought the wind had just tossed dead stuff around. Then I saw the head was gone. Not chewed, torn. The vertebra showed ragged in the hard light, like dry wood snapped. I have seen scavenger work that looked like a crime scene. This had that look, but the burying was clean and weird. Like something had hidden it and got interrupted. I told myself fox. Fisher. A hungry thing with no manners. I told myself to keep walking. We started seeing tracks the next day after the ice fog lifted a little. Not many, because the wind swung its broom and wiped the whole ridge every hour. But in pockets where Sestruti piled up, There were prints, oversized, paw pads wider than my palm, 4 prints deeper and longer than hind, spacing odd, not a smooth gait. Like the front end was heavier than the back, some steps spaced farther than expected, a reach, like a long foreleg pulling weight. On hard crust, they barely dented. In soft pockets, the 4 prints punched in like a man's knee. Hayes squatted and measured with his glove. He didn't like it. He did not say bear or wolf. He said, huh. We pushed into willow scrub one afternoon to cut a little extra brush for a windbreak by the dogs. In the tangles, we found hair caught on the twigs. White hair, coarse, thick guard hairs, not fluff. We bagged some because it felt like the smart thing Rook would nag about. He nodded when we handed him the bag. We can ask game guys later, he said, like later was a place we would go. The dogs knew before we did. They lifted noses and scented the wind off the river. No barking. Ears flat. Tails down. A low whine like a diesel with a bad belt. Then they went quiet, not fall asleep quiet. The other kind. I began to dislike quiet more than storms. At night we heard a rumble far off, not a wolf chorus. I have heard that, and it will raise hair and make you feel small, but it is a sound you can name. This was lower. Chest deep. Short bursts like somebody coughed with a big chest and did not want to broadcast it. Then a bark, but wrong. Short. Harsh. Like a test ping, we told ourselves it was the wind talking. The wind talks. It does not say the same thing twice. This did. We argued because that is what you do when you are trying not to be scared. Delgado kept his voice flat. Deterrence, he said. We show we are a bigger pain than we are food. Hayes said ammo is not reindeer moss and we do not grow more by yelling at it. He wanted us to keep powder dry and keep trips up. Rook said bear maybe, mixed in with wolves. Bears do not read calendars. Sometimes they wake wrong. He had a point. I pulled out a laminated wolf track guide I carried like a cheat sheet. The sizes did not match clean. The print width on the guide didn't match what we saw. The gait diagram looked different. The fronts were too deep in our prints. The spacing went long, then short like a thing stalking and testing. I did not like any of it. I kept my mouth shut because I wanted to stay the mule and not become the mouth. The weather made everything worse. The pressure kept dropping. The antenna iced so fast we were chipping it every other hour. The radio range shrank. Rook had to rotate batteries under his armpits like a mama bird keeping eggs warm. He'd hand a battery off and say, "Your turn," and I'd tuck it under my arm and feel it like a small animal shivering there. The cold made metal sing. You could hear it ping and tick as it contracted. Some nights the river ice snapped, and the crack went off like someone slamming a dumpster lid, flat and sharp, echoing through the valley. Then silence. The waxy, thick kind that comes before snowfall when the wind holds its breath. Dogs shifted on chains. The generator hummed, and we all pretended that meant we were safe. We did more perimeter. We found another hair, same torn neck. We found more prints in little hollows where the wind had missed. Always the same. Big. Front heavy. Irregular. Hayes started pulling his lips tight before we even found anything. Delgado wrote things down in the little green book he kept because leaders write things down. He did not show us the words. He did not have to. They were heavy. One night the bark came closer. Same short sound. Testing. We moved to deterrence as a routine. We put pen flares in pockets. We made sure trip flares were strung low where the wind could not just rip them to useless. We took turns standing near the dogs, just letting whoever was sniffing out there hear that we were awake. Nothing charged the light, nothing moved stupid. It felt like when you were in a bar and you can tell a fight is looking for a reason. But nobody throws the first punch because nobody wants the first hit. I do not like bars. I like that ridge less. You know the part in a story where the calm is over, even if folks are still pretending to drink their coffee like it is a normal day. That moment came during chow changeover. We were rotating from the warming tent to the line, wind steady, ice fog in sheets. The kind of night where light from a headlamp hangs like a wall and your breath blows back at your face. A chain jerked hard, metal on metal. A dog yelped once, high and cut off. Hayes and I were running before anyone said anything. Muscle memory. You hear a dumb sound, you move. Our headlamps cut into fog. Shapes swam and vanished. Snow hammered flat by the wind. We leaned into it, and it felt like leaning off a roof. At the edge of the light, I caught a white bulk, low and wide. My brain tried to call it bear. Then the silhouette refused. The head looked wrong, too big for the shoulder height. The ears were small. The chest was thick and close to the ground, like it had more front than back. Then it slid backward, like it greased itself into the shadow that lives between headlamp beams. It did not run. It chose not to be seen. 2 dogs were just gone. Chains skittered empty, drag marks cut through the crust toward the willow. 1 carcass left behind near the edge, head removed clean at the spine. Not chewed, torn with authority. No guts thrown around, just a body with a neck like a stump. Hayes crouched and then stood slow. He said nothing. His face went closed. We walked the edge. I could see the track line, and it made my gut sour. Asymmetrical. Heavy footprints like kettlebells had been placed in tracks. The hind followed but did not dig as deep. The stride walked, then stopped, then walked. Not panic, not a rush. It felt like a stalk with tests. It made me feel like a rabbit. We took stock. Delgado locked down camp without yelling. He set arcs tighter than usual. He had me move the pulk behind the mess tent as an extra windbreak and maybe as a barricade. We rotated watches with no slack. He had us string trip flares low in pockets, anchoring them where the spindrift could not blow them to useless. We tied lines with numb fingers that turned slick when they touched nylon. The cord bit like a thin saw. Rook's hands shook while he tied. I saw it and pretended not to. Hayes saw it and pretended to not see me seeing. I got my fingers on the knot and steadied him by just being there, close, shoulder to shoulder in that wind. Ammo check told us what we already knew. Rifles with enough to fight a normal fight, not a long one. The shotgun had more dust than shells in its pouch. Flares light but not empty. You start doing math in your head you do not want to do. If this, then that. If that, then maybe we live. We popped a flare not to hit anything, just to paint the night. The hot metal smell moved through the wind like its own thing. Snow hissed where sparks touched. Light bounced off the ice fog and made everything look closer and farther at once. I breathed through my scarf and tasted chemicals. The dogs went silent again. Then one whined like his heart was too big for his chest. We pulled that carcass in, covered it with a tarp and snow. Not because we were squeamish, because bodies become reasons for other bodies to come back. We made a plan to burn dog food closer to the tent, to bait eyes toward the light and away from the chains. I did not like it. It was all we had. Back in the tent, the heater made wet socks smell like wet socks and not death. Rook tried to play casual and checked his radio again. Static, pops, a slice of a voice. Hold, weather, hold. He wrote it down. He did not look up. Delgado set the watch bill and said, "We do not go hero here. We contain. We signal. We signal. We wait for weather windows and dust off. We are not outsmarting the environment. We are surviving in it." He tucked the little green book away like it kept his ribs together. I nodded so hard my hood crackled. That night I lay with my boots unlaced and my pistol close in the bag. I watched my breath move the air in front of my face like a thread. The generator thrum came through the floor like a cat purring under the boards. I thought about the white bulk and how it slid back into the dark like it owned the dark. I slept in a swallow, then woke, then slept, then woke. Every dream was white and too close. The storm arrived like it had plans, and we were not on the invite list. Wind had weight. Spindrift came sideways and made our headlamps into walls you could walk into and bounce off. Visibility dropped to a hand's breadth and then a little more when it wanted to tease us. Your world shrank to 10 feet. You could hear things you could not see, and you learned not to trust your eyes. The river sighed and the tent snapped and the antenna turned into a popsicle no one could lick. Radio was barely worth the breath. We got a few words to the relay. Weather hold, wait out. That was the instruction. It felt like being told to hold your breath while someone figured out if you deserved air. "Copy," Rook said, pencil scratching. He rotated another battery under his arm. He looked thinner by the hour as the storm bullied the tent. I smelled his stress in the way his sweat cut through cold and diesel and made its own stink. They tested us. The pack, or whatever was out there, had patience and brains. A trip flare popped on the east side. We spun and lit the night up with halos of snow. Nothing charged. We reset. 3 minutes later, the west popped. Same deal. Now we were moving, on edge, with wind pushing and ice grabbing our ankles. You cannot be everywhere. You move to one side and you leave a gap on the other. They knew. They timed the pops with gusts so the sound blurred and we could not pin it. We were being worked. Miller mined. That is what Hayes would call me when I looked like a deer kicked in a few times. I caught a pale shape ghosting across my peripheral vision, and did not shoot because the math in my head said, weight, ammo, distance. Did you see what you think you saw? Delgado said, good. Not good boy, not a pat, just a flat good. That kept me human. At the generator shed, something tugged at the fuel line. Delgado and I got there, and the wind took my breath like it had paid for it. We saw the line sway. We saw a ridge of packed snow where a heavy shape had pressed close. Hayes later said he caught a sight-wide head, small ears, shoulders like someone put a barrel under a blanket. The rear dropped fast from that big front. Wrong for a bear. Wrong for a normal dog. He did not fire. He held. He did not like that he held. He told me later and laughed and shook his head and looked like a man who had stared at the ocean too long. We adjusted arcs. Every time we did, it made a new angle for something to slip through. We goose-stepped around the tents like we were herding ghosts. The animals out there exploited wind and micro-terrain like they had read the same playbook but wrote better notes in the margins. In a whiteout, wolves will press close. I have read that since. It is true. Put one that is larger than it should be at the front, and the rest get bold like drunks with a big friend. Our fingers went dumb. Rifle bolts got sluggish. Lube turned thick as bad gravy. Rook tucked magazines under his jacket, skin to metal, to keep springs from pretending they were dead fish. My eye pro-fogged and then ripped loose when a gust got its hands on it. I yelled something dumb. Hayes barked, cheek-warm breath, and I did it, blowing across the lens, watching the cloud clear just long enough to see the ghost of the shape and the ghost of my own fear. The dogs went panic, then quiet. The quiet made me more scared than shouting. I could hear their nails scratch ice as they shifted and tried to make themselves into smaller animals. I wanted to unclip them and let them run. Delgado said no. He was right. 6 dogs running in a whiteout is 6 dead dogs, and maybe a dead man who tries to go after them. We found a caribou calf near the edge of our world when the flare lit a slice of snow into day. Small. Fresh kill. Head gone. Neck torn like the hares. But this was bigger, and it was closer to the perimeter. The snow around it told a story in hard letters. Multiple animals. Tight circle. One leading. No fear of the smell of men and fuel and burning flare residue. They were confident. They were not doing long probes now. They were pushing into our backyard and taking snacks. It made my scalp feel loose. Delgado made a move plan. At first light, he said, which felt like a joke because light had not been a thing for days. We moved down to the riverbed, crossed, and climbed that opposite ridge. We marked an LZ up there on survey. If weather breaks, they can pluck us. If it doesn't, we get height and a better angle on anything that wants to follow. We do the polk like a lifeline. We put chem sticks inside jackets so they stay warm. We drop them at intervals when we need breadcrumbs. He talked simple. We nodded. We packed. He listed. Rook wrote. Hayes checked knots. I felt the salt bite of sweat freezing in my shirt when the wind cut my armpits. We hissed at flares to keep them alive in the gusts. Tripwire caps popped like someone cracking their knuckles. The dogs scratched. The valley felt like a mouth. I tied another trip flare low and flayed my knuckles on a metal stake. The blood went sticky and then shiny and then felt like it had been there forever. My breath hit the scarf and came back at me hot and wet. I wanted to be anywhere else. Not home. Not a bar. Just anywhere with walls that meant it. But the only walls we had were nylon and pride. We slept in shifts. We listened to the wind and the generator fight. Rook made a last call on the radio. Kestrel holds, he said, because that is what you say when you do not have a lot left, but you have not quit. I did not know that was the last time he would say anything on that radio. The generator coughed. Then it did that stutter it does right before it dies, like a man who got punched and is deciding if he should lay down. The lights fluttered. The wind got ears. We all knew what a dead generator means in that cold. Life gets very small, very fast. Delgado moved like he had expected it. Rook, with me, he said. Hayes, Miller, cover. We split. Delgado and Rook slid around the tent wall toward the shed. Hayes and I took opposite corners and dug in behind the little berms of shoveled snow we had piled up like kids making forts. The ice fog made my headlamp into a circle of lies. My rifle felt heavy and stupid in my hands, and I loved it anyway. A trip flare popped. East side. The world went red and pink and insane for a blink. Then, as it cracked and hissed, I saw what I will see until I die. Things slingshotted the light edge, not charging headlong, skirting the line. White shapes low and wide, 2, 3, maybe. It is hard to count when snow blows in sheets and your eyes water and your heart is kicking your ribs. They split our focus like they had talked about it. Rook slipped on rimed ice by the shed. I saw his feet go out. I saw his legs kick like a man trying to run underwater. Then a white form hit him from a low angle, not from above like a leaping cat, but from the yard like a plow. I heard the sound of a hit that makes no sound, just air leaving a body and snow crunching like glass. Hayes fired controlled pairs like the book says. The wind moved the rounds. The snow soaked them. Light bent. I do not know. The shots did not drop it. Maybe he hit bad. Maybe he hit nothing but weather. Delgado turned to yank Rook clear, and that was when the second one came in from the flank. I caught a shoulder and a head, and then all white, and then nothing as it pulled back into the night with the same slippery ease. I snapped the shotgun up and fired once. The recoil felt like the only honest thing I had touched in hours. The form flinched and vanished in the spindrift. No cry. No drama. Just gone like it had stepped through a door. Delgado went under in a tumble that made my stomach cold in a way the air could not. I tried to move. The wind shoved me. Something tore at my leg. Hayes was shouting, but the sound shredded. I lost sight of Rook and found him again in the wash of flare light. Snow red, then white, then pink. His headlamp skittered away and spun like a lighthouse and then died. I crawled and the ice bit my knees through layers like I was naked. By the time I got close, Rook was shaped wrong. I cannot get cute with that. He was wrong. I do not have to draw it for you. Not a lot of gore. More like he'd been rearranged by something that knew where to pull. He did not make a sound at that point. That I am grateful for. I reached and then stopped. The light washed. It was a strobe and a cheat. I could not stay there. I could not bring him back. I hated my legs for listening to my brain when they remembered that lesson. Hayes took a hit to the calf, a bite that found meat under layers. He went down and his face went gray in the flare light. He cursed once, low. He bayoneted at a shape reflexively and I heard a sound then, a short yelp, not pain, more like annoyance. The thing pulled off. He dragged himself to a knee and I was at him then, hauling him up by his harness like he was a kid learning to skate. His blood was hot on my glove and then froze and turned my fingers into rocks. The generator died like a final joke. The silence had weight. The wind had us then. The flares hissed and popped and went dark one by one. Our world got small enough to hold in a hand. 2 men down, perimeter breached. The pack now knew the tent walls meant nothing. They knew we were 4, and now, maybe, 2. If they could count, it was their kind of math. Delgado did not answer when I yelled his name. There was a drag trail into Willow, and I do not write more about that. There is a point where details become cruelty. He was gone. That is the fact. Hayes got his breath back and lied, I can walk. He could not far. He could wait the leg if he wanted to scream. He did not want to scream. He wanted to get out. We made the call without a vote. Exfil now. Before they settled into a siege and we became a buffet that has to sit and watch itself get eaten. Hayes slung an arm over my shoulder. I took his ruck onto the pulk, added extra magazines and flares, and the map with the bearing line, and cinched it all down with my hands so numb they felt like someone else's. The shotgun went over my back on a sling, my rifle in my hands. Pistol on my belt. Hayes gritted his teeth in a way that made his cheeks jump. He nodded once. We moved. The flare wash painted the snow pink. Blood froze in flakes that made the air taste like pennies. Hayes hissed air through them like an animal trying not to show the pack it is hurt. The generator's last cough died in my ears, and the wind filled the hole with a laugh. We left the camp to the dogs and the wind and the white. You think the worst thing is the fight. It is not. It is what comes after, when you know the fight is not over, and you are running on hope and a bearing line while the dark walks behind you and does not get tired. We moved at night because we had no choice. At first light, Delgado had said, but first light was a rumor, and we had a man to carry. I set pace with a compass and a slow boxy count so I did not rush and lose Hayes. I planted chem sticks in the snow at intervals, the ones we had kept inside jackets so they would glow. The wind ate them one by one. They lasted just long enough to make me feel like I was making a mark on the world. Then they went dim and mean and the snow swallowed them. The ridge line was a wall of moving white. The river down there groaned like an old door hinge in an empty house. The sound felt thick and close. Hayes got a pressure bandage onto his calf with hands that would not listen. I helped, and he pretended I did not. He started shivering in a way that scared me. Not the funny shiver. The deep one where the body is a bell someone keeps hitting. Bad sign. His breath came short and white. He kept trying to stand straight and then leaning into me. Pride is heavy. I carried both. Footfalls followed us. Not loud, soft. You would not hear them if you did not stop and let your heart get quiet. We stopped and they stopped. We moved and they moved. It is an old dance, and we were learning the steps on the floor where the music never stops. At one point, on the ridge to our right, snow peeled off in a sheet, and I saw a silhouette parallel to us, larger than the rest. Head carried low, front heavy. It did not sneak. It did not rush. It just walked with us like a bouncer walking a drunk out of a bar, kindly for now. My own hands went numb. Frostnip kissed my fingers even though I had done everything right. I rotated gloves. I stuffed warmers in my palms and cursed at how they took forever to wake. My sling iced. My rifle bolt felt sticky even after I warmed it under my arm between steps. I kept the weapon close enough to sweat on it and felt the sweat turn cold and hate me. In a whiteout, your ears turn into liars. The wind shifts and you hear words in it. You hear your mother, your first sergeant, your drill instructor, your ex, your own best lies. I needed something simple to keep my head upright. So I used cadence like we had in basic, not the whole song, just a beat. Left, right, left, right. Hayes answered in a whisper when he had breath. When he didn't, I said both sides for both of us because otherwise the night would say something else in my ear and I did not want to hear it. A probe came in from behind. Not a charge, not a rush, a test. I turned and snap flared the snow. The flare spit light like a snake. The shape did not sprint away. It drifted back and circled wide, staying just outside where the hiss turned the night today. It was learning me. I hated that calm. We hit the riverbed finally, flat, exposed. The edges had overflow ice-rimmed, glossy, and hungry. The river ice groaned again, and the sound went up my legs like a tuning fork. My feet felt like they belonged to a dead man I borrowed them from. Plan was simple in my head. Cross fast. Gain the far ridge. Make them come uphill into wind and flare glare. Use gravity and angles. Keep them off Hayes. Keep them out of my shadow. Hayes kept moving like a man with a job and a person he wants to be. We got into the open, and that is when the night felt bigger than any church I ever stood inside. I pulled the pulk, and it slid nice on the glare ice until it didn't. One runner hit a ripple and jumped and tried to torque my shoulder out. I swore and kept pulling. Hayes went down once, and I hauled him by his harness loop like a sack. He cursed me and thanked me in the same breath. We laughed once, and it sounded like a noise inside a can. Behind us, the big one tested the open. I caught it in a sideways look. Long for. Wide skull. Ears buried in the coat. The breath came out of its mouth like a little freight train. It did not rush. It took 2 steps onto the ice, and then off again like it wanted to feel the surface. I did not shoot. Shooting there would have been a waste. Distance was weird, and the wind would have picked the rounds up and done its trick with them. I saved hate for later. We crossed. That is the line. We made the other side with boots that slipped in a pulk that tried to roll. The edges had that sigh a river makes when it is bored with you and is going to let you pass only so it can watch what happens next. Up we went into sparse black spruce that looked dead but will outlive us all. I set a half moon with what we had left. 1 trip flare, 2 pen flares, 2 mags that were heavier in my head than in my hands, 3 shells in the shotgun that felt like prayers you do not waste on things you can do yourself. I tucked Hayes behind me where he could still watch a sector. He put his pistol on his lap and chewed air like I had fed it to him in pieces, and pinned his leg with a strap to keep it quiet. The wind came hard down the ridge and shoved the snow into ropes that wrapped around trunks and cut into the world like wire. The glow from the chem sticks behind us on the river went small, and then nothing. The night said, "Now." I said, "Fine." They came low, using trunk shadows like smart things do. 3 shapes at first. White with the pine soot on their flanks, so they were not just ghosts anymore. They moved like swimmers in slow water, nothing wasted. I put the rifle up and stuttered fire in short-controlled pairs, because that is how you do when you are past your fear and into work. 1 yelped and vanished sideways. Hit? Maybe. Snow eats truth. The big one did not care about any of that. It came slow, head low, wide skull pushing the air, ears tucked into fur, breath making short plumes that the wind shredded. I could see what made the tracks wrong. The front end was a machine. The rear was along for the ride. It had that front heavy gait that made the foreprints dig deep and the hind float. It did not feel supernatural. It felt like a build, a wrong build. A thing that had thrived in this place since before my great-grandma's grandma knew the word Alaska. I had a word now for what people call it, but I did not back then. Back then, it was just the biggest bad dog I had ever seen, and it was not afraid of me. I waited. I did not waste. I let it come to the point where wind and terrain gave me the best chance of doing something other than making noise. Then I lit the last handheld flare. The flare hissed like a fat snake, spitting its light and bright in my glove. I lobbed it downhill past the animal so it would have to walk between me and the flame. It checked. Not fear, just a pause to reclock the world. The flare painted it from the side. I saw muscle in the forequarters like braided cable. I saw the eyes not glow like demon eyes, just catch light and throw it back honest. Nothing magic. Just a predator that did not blink at men. I aimed lower chest and shoulder, where motion was least and wind was getting cut by trunks. The trigger brake felt clean. The recoil was there and gone. The shot punched snow around the thing's shoulder, and I thought I saw a dip, just a hair, like a step miscounted. Then it took a step sideways in the wind, and the swirl grabbed it and cut it away from me like a curtain being pulled. It vanished into the cut, and the wind said, "You do not get that one today." The other shapes pulled with it, like the game had changed a notch. Not panic. Not running like rabbits. Just a decision made by whatever brain they used when they were counting calories and risk. They peeled. They pulled into the timber where the wind was strongest and the flare hiss could not follow. I held sight picture on the empty space where they had been, because sometimes your body needs to do the right thing even when your brain knows it is over. We did not win. We did not lose right there either. We did what men do when they are being measured by something without a story to tell. We made it expensive. We made it not worth the next step. In winter, predators count. We were a bad number. The flare hiss beat the wind for a few breaths and then lost. Haze breathed shallow behind me. The snow crust popped once under a slow pad and then went quiet the way an argument ends when someone walks out. The sky got a shade lighter. Morning was a rumor, turning real. I did not trust it. I still do not trust mornings. We sat there until the flare turned black. I did not move because moving felt like permission for the world to start up again. I told Hayes a dumb joke about Top and a butter bar who once tried to eat an MRE fruit bar with the wrapper on. "Tastes the same either way," Hayes said, voice thin. He was wrong. It tasted like victory then. Light came like a truce, weak and unsure. The weather broke just enough for help to thread the valley. We heard it before we saw it. The whine of a snow machine and the deeper growl of another behind it. Guard medics with faces wrapped and eyes that said they had seen this valley's teeth before. They moved like they were in a kitchen they owned. They got Hayes on a sled and tucked him tight. Hypothermic, but not gone. He cracked a smile you could barely see under the frost and said, "You're late," and one of them said, "Traffic," because that is how people like us say we love each other. They looked at my hands and said, "You're going to lose feeling for a while," and I said, "I already did," and we laughed like idiots. My fingers were white and waxy, and then red and angry, and then they settled into a pain I can still find when I want to feel honest. We went back up with them to camp. The scene looked like the weather had been angry with ropes. Torn lines. Blood patterns smudged and then polished by spindrift. Drag trails into willow that ended where the wind said they end. No wolves recovered. No animals lying dead to make us feel like we had solved anything. The generator sat quiet with a little rhyme necklace where the line had been tugged. The dogs were alive, rattled, two gone, like before. The four left did not make a sound when we walked back in. They watched us with eyes like we were the ones who had done something strange. Along the route we had taken, the medics pointed to tracks. Oversized, front-heavy signature, spacing that went long then short, the same story stamped in fresh snow. In a few spots there was a mist of blood where someone had nicked something. It stopped where the wind wiped the slate. No big pools. Nothing to photograph for the guys back at the office who put pictures on boards and draw circles around them in red marker. The official report ended up reading like this, or close. Wolf encounter in severe weather. Probable pack of 5 to 7. Alpha larger than normal. Contributing factors. Blizzard conditions. Radio